Beneath the streets of Centralia, Pennsylvania, an inferno has been burning for over 60 years. Temperatures past 1,000 degrees. Toxic gases rise through the earth into people's homes. It started with one decision. A town council burned their landfill on a spring afternoon in 1962. 1,400 people once lived here. Today, almost no one is left, and the fire below shows no sign of stopping. In 1841, a coal mining settlement called Bull's Head was established in the hills of Columbia County. By the time it was incorporated as the borough of Centralia in 1866, its identity was fully forged in anthracite coal. For nearly a century, life here revolved around the rhythm of the mines. Families built homes, opened storefronts, and raised children along a neat grid of streets, while operators carved out a vast network of tunnels directly beneath their foundations. By the early 1960s, Centralia was a stable, functioning community of around 1,400 residents. It had local churches, active civic clubs, and a steady blue-collar economy. But decades of extracting premium hard coal had hollowed out the earth beneath the borough, leaving a labyrinth of abandoned chambers and dry, exposed pillars of coal. The town was thriving, completely unaware that its entire existence rested on a structural tinderbox. On May 27, 1962, the Centralia Borough Council sought to clean up the town ahead of the annual Memorial Day festivities. They ordered a controlled burn at the municipal landfill, a routine task assigned to 5 volunteer firefighters. But this was no ordinary landfill. Instead of solid clay, the dump was situated inside an abandoned strip mine pit excavated decades earlier. The pit lacked a vital safety feature, a non-combustible shale barrier to seal the trash from the earth. When the volunteers ignited the refuse pile, the intense heat found a direct path through the unsealed bottom of the pit. It quickly penetrated the carbonaceous waste and reached the exposed anthracite seams of the Buck Mountain coal bed below. Firefighters sprayed water on the surface, but the flames repeatedly flared back to life from beneath. The fire had escaped the surface. It was now drawing oxygen directly from the vast labyrinth of abandoned tunnels, quietly transitioning from a routine civic cleanup into a self-sustaining underground inferno. Anthracite coal is nearly pure carbon, meaning it burns slow, steady, and incredibly hot. Once ignited, an underground coal seam requires only a small, constant draft of oxygen to sustain itself, and the labyrinth of abandoned mine tunnels beneath Centralia acted like a massive furnace intake system. Subsurface temperatures quickly climbed past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, with peak borehole measurements eventually registering a glass-melting 1,350 degrees Fahrenheit. As the coal smoldered in the oxygen-rich darkness, it slowly consumed the pillars supporting the streets above, releasing a silent, toxic mixture of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and highly volatile methane. Putting it out was not a matter of simply spraying water, which would only vaporize into scalding steam. Federal engineers calculated that completely extinguishing the underground inferno would require a massive excavation effort to physically dig out the burning seams. The price tag for this operation was estimated at $663 million. That cost was so staggering that remediation was abandoned, leaving the fire to burn completely unchecked. The people of Centralia spent the next 15 years adapting to a changing environment. The creeping threat beneath their feet became a series of strange, domestic anomalies. Residents noticed basement walls growing warm to the touch, heating cellar rooms without a furnace. In the dead of winter, neat patches of backyard soil remained completely free of frost, and snow melted the moment it hit the pavement. A faint, persistent sulfur smell of rotten eggs hung low in the morning air, drifting through streets and alleys. Sidewalks slowly spiderwebbed with cracks, venting thin wisps of steam and smoke into the cold mountain air. Tomatoes grew in gardens late into November, nourished by the unnatural warmth rising through the earth. By the late 1970s, the state established air monitoring stations to track the venting gases. Yet daily life continued as normal. Children still played in the streets and families still gathered for dinner, normalizing a reality that made no physical sense, quietly hoping the hidden furnace below would eventually starve itself of fuel. By the early 1980s, the warmth in the basements was no longer a novelty. It became a conduit for an invisible, odorless poison. Carbon monoxide began seeping through foundation cracks and cellar floors directly into living spaces. Inside family homes, safety monitors regularly detected gas levels exceeding the EPA threshold of 9 parts per million. The high-pitched beep of these alarms became the background noise of daily life in Centralia, sounding multiple times a day and forcing families to flee into the cold. Inside, the air caused persistent headaches, nausea, and sudden bouts of dizziness. Some residents lost consciousness in their own living rooms. Parents slept with windows cracked in the middle of winter, terrified they would not wake up. The threat was entirely unseen, turning the sanctuary of the home into a source of constant physical and psychological dread. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 1981, 12-year-old Todd Domboski was playing in his grandmother's yard at 131 Locust Avenue. He noticed a thin wisp of smoke rising from the grass, and he walked over to inspect it. Without warning, the ground liquefied. The sod gave way, opening a 4-foot-wide sinkhole that plunged nearly 300 feet directly into the smoldering mine workings below. Inside the raw cavity, toxic gases registered 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and carbon monoxide levels hit 11 parts per million. As Todd slid into the dark void, he managed to grab a tree root. He clung to it for 45 terrifying seconds, shouting for help, until his cousin Eric Wolfgang and a neighbor dragged him to safety. Todd was rushed to nearby Ashland Hospital for gas inhalation, escaping without lasting physical injuries. By absolute coincidence, state officials were touring the borough that morning to assess the fire's long-term impact. The boy's near-fatal plunge instantly became the terrifying public face of the disaster, capturing national headlines. Centralia was no longer just a town adapting to a strange, warm nuisance beneath its streets. The very earth was actively collapsing, and the threat of the fire had become completely impossible to ignore. In 1984, the United States Congress appropriated over $42 million for a voluntary relocation program designed to buy out homes and businesses threatened by the advancing gases. Between 1985 and 1991, the government acquired 545 properties, shifting families to neighboring towns like Ashland and Frackville. For those who refused to leave, the state resorted to legal force. In January 1992, Pennsylvania authorities launched eminent domain proceedings to condemn the remaining private land, sparking a bitter conflict over property rights and public safety. Under a special life estate provision, remaining residents could stay in their homes until death, after which the land would revert to the state. By 2002, the United States Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code, 17927, administratively erasing the town from the national map. A few determined residents chose to stay, clinging to homes they refused to abandon. Under a state agreement, they could remain for their lifetimes, but upon their deaths, their properties would revert to the government. Today, only a handful of people live along streets where nature has swallowed the empty lots. Thin plumes of sulfurous steam still vent through the cracked asphalt, a constant reminder of the furnace below. This eerie atmosphere of creeping fog and smoking fissures directly inspired the screen adaptation of the horror film Silent Hill. Geologists estimate the fire will burn for another 100 years, perhaps 250, before the coal is exhausted. Centralia remains a haunting paradox, a town that still exists on official county maps, while almost entirely vanishing from the physical world. Today, Centralia remains on the map, a zip code with no destination. While the earth quietly vents, the fire below continues its slow, centuries-long march. It stands as a haunting reminder of how quickly our world can vanish beneath us. Subscribe for more untold stories.